All right, it's Tuesday, March 7th. This is an end of the day SPY recap, and today we end up with a big red bar to the downside, a two down day. It was kind of an actionable signal after going two up, two down, and price obviously moved much lower all day long into what was kind of recognized as a fair value gap in the pre-market video. If we go to the 15-minute chart, I discussed in the pre-market video how this was kind of inefficient pricing all the way up, and if we were going to come down, we could fill some of that in. The big question was going to be, if we get a little bit lower, today, were we going to come all the way down and fill it in as we have pretty much done, or was it going to possibly just come down, maybe not reach the target, and eventually kind of pause here and start back up again? We don't know for sure, but what happened was the market, as it usually does price action wise, tipped its hand, and right out of the gates, this is the 15-minute chart today, I bought some puts here at the first bar. I shot a video on that, and then once it had a big red bar here after Fed chairman spoke to the downside, that kind of tipped its hand that today was going to be a pretty big down day, and we had a good chance of filling in a lot of this gap. Now, I actually highlighted the fair value gap. It's actually like a double gap in here, overlapping, first between the low of this bar and the high of this bar. That was our initial gap. I kind of put a square in here to show you that's kind of gap number one. And then if you go back the day before, between the low of this bar and the high of this bar, this was another gap in here. So you put the two together, and that's kind of, you can see here, low of that bar, high of this bar. That's sort of the inefficient pricing, and we came down and pretty much, filled most of that in. There's still a little room to go to the downside, and you do expect a little follow through tomorrow. And in a second, I'll, show why we, very likely could be heading down to the bottom of this broadening formation that we drew. And again, that's price discovery, making higher highs and lower lows, and now we have a target in play. But in terms of today, again, after the big move down, whether, you had another little fair value gap between the high of this bar and the low of this bar and the high of this bar right in here. So when you had a little bit of a rally here on bar number 4 and 5, it paused right in its gap. That's kind of what price does. It either takes out liquidity or it fills in inefficient pricing. Those are the two things that we just look for over and over again on all time frames. So we just kind of came up here, filled that in, and then made a new low. And this was a typical directional day where you had, if you want to look at it as one push down, pause, second push down, that could have been your morning trade. And as it turns out, you had one other, push up, and then an inside bar, and then another secondary trade here for the afternoon to go short as well. And that and you knew some of the targets, since you had a pretty negative day in force, could have been to take out this fair value gap in here. And now, like I said, we're expecting lower prices tomorrow. If I look at the weekly chart, you can see we've come below. We have a 2-up week failure. We took out the highs of the previous week. We stayed below the open that I showed you, that yellow line here today, and that gave us a negative bias, and we kind of moved to the halfway point of the prior week. So we could be getting that rare 3, bar to the upside, followed by an outside 3 bar to the downside. The only thing is, I'm looking at this chart here. This is a pretty big sell, buying tail. So a lot of times halfway point of that area could be support, which is right near the bottom of that fair value gap. So maybe tomorrow we only come down a little bit and we have more of a pause before possibly heading lower, or maybe, this is the daily chart again, maybe we get a lot of momentum and head lower. We'll let price action lead the way as always, but until we get above the halfway point of this bar tomorrow, or that would be the only way I'd start getting positive. Obviously, with a negative, we're below the yellow line on the open of the week with 3 days to go. So until we even get above there, I'm just going to stay net biased to the downside. And the big thing, again, we've been talking about this monthly chart, how on March 1st we had that 2 down month start, and then we kind of rallied a little bit from there, but we only got to the halfway point of that bar. And you can see this monthly bar is starting to get less and less green here. The yellow line represents the open of that month. So if we get below there, at any point, we have that 2 down month with a, red bar that sort of projects down to these 3 monthly lows. And we still have all of March to get there. And that's something we've always kept in mind as we headed higher. We're going to get that reversal. So it looks like, we got to the top of this broadening formation. We had the actionable signal today. We were able to get short, and we ended up with the big red day to the downside, which is, you don't necessarily expect that type of day, but like I said, price action kind of tipped its hand early that was a strong possibility, knowing you had all kinds of inefficient pricing in here to fill. So we'll see. Look for follow through lower tomorrow for sure. We'll see how much momentum kicks in. Yellow line here is the month that turns the monthly chart. That's an interesting level because it's kind of the halfway point of this, that right here, this little buying tail in the week that could be support. So either we're going to slice right through there and kind of get to the bottom, make a higher high and a lower low here on the weekly chart and get that monthly chart turn red, or maybe somehow we pause in here and eventually start higher, but that's going to take a lot of constructive price action at this point to start, to get the bias back to the upside. So let's see how we go tomorrow. But today, again, right from the start, right below the pre-market range, we had that sell signal, and definitely, kind of a 2 push down day directionally all day long. So let's see where we go tomorrow.